What's interesting, in a moment of crisis, what did we see coming to the fore? So during the pandemic, we saw it was a lot of those female leaders had the ability to lead in uncharted territory, when you couldn't connect with your people in person, when there was a global crisis going on, when people were struggling to do their work and also struggling to cope at home.
We are going to talk now about women at the top of British business. The UK is often described as a global leader when it comes to making sure that women do have a place in the boardroom. Women now hold around 43% of board roles across the FTSE 350, and nearly 9 in 10 companies have hit or are close to hitting the 40% target. But when it comes to the very top job, progress does appear to have stalled. There were 9 female CEOs in the FTSE 100 last year, and that's exactly the same as the year before. So why aren't women becoming chief executives, and why is that 40% target not being hit across the board? Well, Vivienne Artz is CEO of the FTSE Women Leaders Review. Good afternoon.
Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's very, very good to see you. So why do you think it hasn't really changed all that much? I mean, there's been huge progress, but right at the very, very top, it's a bit, What do you think?
Well, is it right at the very, very top? I think there are a number of roles at the top, and that's why we selected the 4 key roles as the areas of focus: the chair, the CEO, the finance director, and the senior independent director. And you're absolutely spot on. The progress in relation to the CEO role has been slow. In 2021, we had 8, and in 2025, we have 9 now in the FTSE 100, which is not exactly astronomical progress. It's not the progress that we've seen in relation to other areas. We do focus on the CEO role because there are so few, because the media focuses on the CEO role, because every time we talk about a CEO and they happen to be a woman, we say, and it's a female CEO. And then we ask other questions that are completely irrelevant to the role.
OK, well, let's tackle that. They are scrutinised in a very different way, aren't they?
They are. And I think it makes it very difficult to succeed in that role when you're being asked things that are perhaps not relevant, or things that are personal, things that men wouldn't otherwise be asked. And what we should be doing is really measuring those women on their track record in that role as the actual CEO. But if we want to know why we don't have more female CEOs, I think part of it is actually looking at the pipeline, and how do we build the talent pipeline to make sure that we do have more, so that we're not focused on this very, very small number going forward, but actually we have that full breadth of talent at the top of UK business, setting strategy and setting culture. And part of that is to do with the fact that we don't have as many women in those P&L or revenue generating roles, heading up business lines at the point in their career when they're ready to be considered for that next step.
I mean, those of us who've not worked in business, certainly not at anything like the level that you have, I know. What kind of jobs within a company are more natural precursors to becoming the boss, the big boss? What kind of role would you need to have performed to one day be in with a chance of running the whole thing?
Being the head of sales, being the chief financial officer, having responsibility for building the business, having that customer interaction. And that's why we call them revenue generating roles. You're in a role that's actually generating revenue for your company, as opposed to the internal general counsel or the head of compliance or even the CIO, although one has to ask in this digital age
that's
whether
the
or not chief information officer, whether actually they shouldn't be being groomed for these roles, given that everything is increasingly digital within organisations and that transformation that's taking place.
But are there lots of female CIOs?
There is an increasing number of female CIOs, but long way from being at 50%. And we have been tracking the functional roles, which are the roles where you're doing an important job within the business, but it isn't a revenue generating role. And we do find that women tend to over-index in those roles, i.e. there are more women in those roles than in the revenue generating roles. So I think if we're serious about building the pipeline, if we're serious about seeing more female CEOs, then we need to be looking at how are we preparing our talent to make sure that they have the right exposure to the range of roles within an organisation, so that they are in that cohort that's there to be selected for CEO going forward.
OK, is the elephant in the room the fact that a woman who is going to give her life to a business role, and if you are the CEO, let's face it, you've got to live and breathe this 24/7, haven't you? She needs a supportive partner. Now, that partner may or may not be male. She may not have one at all, but if she has a man in her life, that man needs to be quite an unusual chap. What would you say?
It's really interesting. There's a fascinating book called Female Breadwinners, written by Dr. Suzanne Doyle Morris many years ago. And as a result of discussions in her coaching area with female breadwinners, she found that actually that was the single main ingredient to success was whoever your partner was, that they were actually supportive of the role that you were doing. So I think that's a really important part of it, is that a CEO role can be all-consuming. But I suppose the challenge there is actually how can we re-articulate? Does it have to be as all-consuming as it traditionally has been?
Well, tell me, is presenteeism in or out at the moment? Because it was very much in, then it was out for a bit. Is it back?
I think in certain sectors and different cultures, we're seeing that desire to go back to presenteeism. But the reality is, again, if we look at King's College London, for example, they're doing excellent work on flexible working, and that presenteeism is being proven not to be necessary for success. And I think if we can re-articulate how that looks like, what leadership looks like, how it can be represented and how it can be practiced in a successful way, I think then we can change the culture around it and make that role much more attractive to women.
Perhaps we should celebrate those women who have got to the top. And I'm just looking at the range. I can't name all of them, but people would be bored to tears. But Severn Trent, for example, Diageo, GSK. I mean, they're very different organisations. Why have they all done okay and had a female CEO? Is it possible to generalise?
I don't know if you can generalise, but I would say that well done to the chairs of those boards, because it's the board who selects the CEO, and those chairs have shown vision. They have identified the top talent, because those have all been very successful female CEOs in their different way. They've all faced challenges, enormous challenges in their organisations, but they've done an amazing job. So the credit goes to, and I have to do a shout out for all the men, because at the end of the day, how did change happen as a result of the FTSE Women Leaders review? Basically, most chairs were men, and it's those men that have been driving the change, understanding that the breadth of talent is essential to building resilient organisations, and having that diversity of thought and experiences is so critical. So it's actually those boards that are showing the leadership by looking for the talent to make sure that they get women and diversity of thought in those leadership roles.
But because I guess there are so few women, relatively speaking, at the very top, if something goes belly up on her watch, then, I mean, everything hits the fan, doesn't it? And then you probably would see it filtering down to other women not getting the opportunity.
It's interesting is that whole glass cliff thing, which is often that women are invited in to take a role where a lot of the men might step back because it's high risk, but it's the only opportunity you're going to have. So it is high risk. I think we need to just, again, look at this in a much more balanced way. Men and women succeed actually not in very different ways. But we always focus on the bad news story. And I think there is a very good news story here as well, which is that there is success and that role modelling is important. But the only way we're going to increase that role modelling is if we start looking at talent in a different way. What is the criteria for CEO? Are we always looking for someone who's done the job previously? Or are we actually looking for a fresh approach, fresh eyes in an incredibly disruptive world, a world where there's no precedent for a lot of what we're encountering? I think we should be looking at people who've got a range of skills.
Can I just ask about whether actually I've completely forgotten what I was going to ask you. Hang on, it's quite a pivotal point. And I can't remember it. Yes.
Recall that,
While
can
I'm
I just
fumbling.
step in and ask you whether it is still the case that companies that do have an equal distribution of women at the top actually do better in terms of their profit margins and their success?
That's what I was going to ask.
Oh my goodness.
Well, there we go. Great minds think alike.
Yeah, good partnership.
Well, isn't it interesting that the companies that perform the best are the FTSE 100 because they have the best results. And they also have the best gender representation, both on boards and in leadership.
So money talks, and it's saying something, isn't it?
It does, and the results are there for everyone to see.
Do you know, I do think that the point is fascinating about how to celebrate the supportive partner of somebody right at the very top of any profession. And actually, we've got so much work to do on that, haven't we? And if we can celebrate what I think society would call the beta male a little bit more, we'd be in an awful lot better place, full stop, wouldn't we? But we slightly take the mick, I think, still, and that powerful alpha male stretch that's going on at the moment is really damaging.
Yeah, I think we see some really scary examples of that out there at the moment. But what's interesting, in a moment of crisis, what did we see coming to the fore? So during the pandemic, we saw it was a lot of those female leaders had the ability to lead in uncharted territory, when you couldn't connect with your people in person, when there was a global crisis going on, when people were struggling to do their work and also struggling to cope at home. And actually, it's been interesting to see a lot of those behaviours, the emotional intelligence, the ability to connect with people was so important important to bringing organisations together.
Does money matter? Because I think women have got a part to play in this, actually. I'm appalled when I see the salaries of some of these female CEOs. Like, what? She's earning £21 million a year. But I wouldn't be as indignant if it were a man. So I'm in the mix here and I'm to blame for this. Can I get over myself, Vivienne?
Oh, you're going to have to get over yourself.
Okay, all right.
They deserve every penny.
Well, spirited, thank you very much. Thank you to Fee for helping me out. The mind just went, but you've got to acknowledge it sometimes. There's no point pretending. Vivienne, lovely to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, here for you, sister.
Thank you. Vivienne Artz, CEO of the FTSE Women Leaders Review.